Here we go, the May 23rd book club, Career Conversations book club. So just a reminder, if you want to share anything on social media, hashtag GA Career Conversations. It would be good to have the conversation after this hour and a half as well. A few quick notes, as you remember, the format for our book clubs. First, we're going to have a few introductory remarks and comments by Anita. Then we're going to dig into the book and get into some of the chapters and topics that were really critical in the book. And then we're going to open it up to you. So have those questions available. Think about what those comments and feedback that you want to offer us. And that'll wrap up the 90 minutes before we know it. For anybody who's online who is an Ontario lawyer, there is 1.5 hours of professionalism through the Law Society of Ontario. So afterwards, you can claim the professionalism credit. If you're watching this after the fact, you are still eligible, and I did confirm it with the Law Society. You are still eligible for the credit as well, for the 1.5 hours of professionalism credit. And again, as I've said before, I have in the past thought about having conversations that are respectful of everybody, that are brave, powerful, to allow each of us to be engaged with the conversations. And there's some really incredible topics that we're going to be covering this evening. And I want this to be an accountable space. As an author had previously said to me, not to me, but into LinkedIn, she had posted, Elisa Akinhora had posted a note that brave spaces can be exhausting. So what I'm asking all of us to be is accountable for our own actions, our own comments, be mindful and respectful of each other. And as we move forward, have your questions and your comments, and just include a little bit of accountability for each and every one of us. I'm going to stop sharing this particular slide. And what I'd like to do is really start with the book. And Anita, welcome. I finally had the pleasure of chatting with you. I've exchanged a lot of conversations with you online. One of the things that I always start with in terms of the book club conversation is to give people an overview of their career journey. I know that you talk about it in the book sort of with some specificity, but an overview of where you are now, how you got here, and some of the personal highlights, professional highlights from your career journey. So over to you, with a great thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Gina. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone who's participating. It really means a lot. And I'm hoping that this evening is an interesting evening and an inspiring evening, perhaps. So I'll start with what Gina has just mentioned, which is a little bit of a summary of my career journey. I'm a lawyer. I'm a family lawyer. That's all I practice in, exclusively in matrimonial law. And I got to this point in my life after obtaining my undergraduate degree in political science and then moving on to law school, studying in Toronto at the University of Toronto, and having a plan for some time to become a lawyer. And I articled at a full service firm downtown, gained experience in various areas of the law, and ended up doing a little bit more in family law and quite enjoying parts of it. That led me to starting to practice at a family law boutique in the city. And I had the opportunity of working with one of the most well-known and respected family lawyers probably in the country, Harold Niman. And I worked with him for about 19 years. And I'm still practicing family law, but my firm underwent some change. And I ended up stepping away from the law for approximately 2 years and doing different things. I wrote Unfolding. I became a life coach, and I had a chance to really explore different parts of me that I hadn't had an opportunity to really explore along my lengthy journey as a lawyer. I'm practicing family law now in Midtown Toronto. I'm at J K Hannaford Barristers, where I'm a partner. We do exclusive family law, nothing else but family law. And I'm excited about continuing in that practice, but in a different role and at a different firm after having experienced a different journey.
I'm glad that you're able to share that with us. And again, the pivots that you've done, I think, are some things that we'll come to a little bit later on. Now, one of the things that my favorite word, one of my very favorite words, is serendipity. And I always ask this question as we get started with the authors. You have, and you've said in your book, I don't think I'm saying anything out of line, often been a planner regarding your career. And I think you also mentioned that even just in your introduction. And I know we both encourage reflection and planning in careers, but we also both recognize that sometimes serendipity or chance is involved. And I'm asking you, as I've asked my other guests as well, how much of your career would you say that was you were planning strategically and very, thoughtfully, and how much did chance occurrences that you recognized and pursued become part of your career journey?
That's an interesting question, because you are absolutely correct. I have been a planner for a lot of my life, and certainly getting into this career was as a result of a lot of planning. And I took, a pretty linear path towards practice. So there was a lot of planning in that. And then, however, during the course of my career as a family lawyer, there was a little bit of that serendipity and chance, and perhaps opportunities that I wouldn't have expected or necessarily planned for, that kind of happened by chance and by, crossing paths with people that I didn't really expect to cross paths with, and exploring, those nudges that I had along the way to try to do something a little bit different. For example, after practicing for about 5, or I'd say longer than that, maybe 7 or 8 years, I crossed paths with a judge who was a co-author of a legal text. And at the time, she was considering changing her role and no longer doing that. And we got to talking. This happened to be at a conference. I probably wouldn't have, had this opportunity to have this kind of discussion with her, but for that conference. And she found out that I, was really interested in legal writing. And I ended up taking over with another co-author that role, and becoming a co-author of a legal text, the Annotated Children's Law Reform Act, which took my career path on a little bit of a different trajectory. So I was once, practicing exclusively, and then I started doing a lot of writing as part of my practice. And I co-authored another legal text after a few years. And that was a kind of moment of serendipity and chance, and was not a plan, because although I liked writing, I never sought out this particular opportunity or even imagined that I would be going in this direction. And the same thing happened when my firm dissolved, where I was an associate. And then I stepped away from law for a while because I ended up pursuing coaching for myself, to find out, what more I could do and what direction I could move in, and then became very interested in coaching and ended up working as a coach for some time. And that wasn't part of a plan. That was an opportunity that arose. And, if it hadn't been that particular time, I don't think I would have gone along that path. And of course, writing this book, I've always enjoyed writing, but I don't think I would have written this book, for example, if I was just practicing full time. I think it was the right time to do it, and the right time where I explored, again, nudges that I had, and little whispers of, perhaps I could write, perhaps I can pursue that, perhaps I can write a book that is not law related. So definitely there have been those kinds of moments.
I really appreciate that, and I know in the past we've not really asked our book club members to share any serendipitous moments that they've had in their career. So if anybody's interested, this would be a great time in the chat just to include times when you were not going according to the plan, and then something happened serendipitously that you were open to. And Anita, I think you made the comment, little whispers or little nudges that you at least explored, and there was something that was saying, do it, or try it, or listen to it, or ask the person, or meet this person. So if anybody wants to share a serendipitous moment in their career, I think it'll be really great to be able to see how serendipity does play out for all of us. And I think I've had a number of different serendipitous experiences in my career, and one was just happened to see, after applying for all sorts of different jobs in family law at the time, which I was practicing, happened to be reading one that caught my attention, because I too had been in coaching and career coaching for myself, and seeing something from my my alma mater at Osgood that was to start up a career coaching office in the law school. And again, I wasn't thinking about that. It wasn't even on my radar. And it happened that I saw that and I thought, let's explore it. Is that possibility of moving forward to explore, right? Just scratching that a little bit, that curiosity a little bit. So anybody who has a serendipitous moment, I'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you. But as you're typing that, we'll come into those if people do have those questions. I want to get into the book. First of all, I just have to say the cover, spectacular. It's a beautiful, beautiful cover. It's such a creative design, and the unfolding, and the flower with the craziness of life, right? Sometimes.
Yes, really, you got it.
Okay, so I do get that analogy.
Yes.
Why did you feel, and I know that you said that it was a serendipitous moment for you, but why did you feel like you had to research and share this book with the world? What was the importance of it for you?
Well, the main motivation was to share my journey to motherhood. That was the main motivation. I had been wanting to share that journey for some time. That was a constant whisper over, I guess, since becoming a mom in 2015, for about 3 or 4 years. That was a persistent thought that I had, but it was always a thought of one day I'll do that. I thought it was really important to share. But then, of course, after some time had passed, when I initially thought that I would be writing a book about my journey to motherhood, I realized that the book was about more than just that. Mm-hmm. Because by that time, of course, I had experienced a different journey, a journey of even becoming a different type of mother, in the sense of growing into my role as a mother, and kind of, abandoning those paradigms that I had had in the narratives when I was a new mother, and the growth that occurred then, as well as my career journey, which is also a significant part of the book, in the sense of the growth that I had, realizing that I wasn't simply a lawyer. And that, even though I knew that I had other skills and interests, and my life is certainly not solely one that is grounded in my profession and in my job. I like to think I have a lot of other interests, and I'm, not simply passionate about practicing family law. It's still a career and a job, and there are other parts of me in addition to that. But I didn't truly understand that I could do other things with my other elements. And when I finally understood and recognized those pieces of myself, I wanted to share that story as well. So the book really evolved into something more than what it was initially intended, which was, a sharing of my fertility journey and, the challenges I experienced there, and the joys, and what ultimately happened becoming a mother in my 40s. It became a lot more than that.
And it is important to share the motherhood journey, the career journey, all of that with other women in particular. And I think today, if I'm not mistaken, it's mostly it is all women on the call. And I wish there were some men, but that's okay in terms of the conversation. But it's an important conversation to be had with women. And we'll sort of talk about some of these things that we don't talk about so openly, that you just put out there in the book, which I really am grateful to you. But before we do, you talked about in chapter 4, your late mom, who I know that you were quite close to. and her mantra. And there was one phrase that she would say to you growing up and that you sort of adopted and adapted. And I wonder if you can tell us what the mantra meant to you. And it was solutions, not problems. And you corrected me, because I think I had solution, not problems. So solutions, not problems. What did it mean to you then as a young person? What does it mean to you now? And how do you use that mantra? Is it still something that's relevant to your life?
Absolutely, it really is. And it's funny because when I was writing the book, that was one of the most vivid memories that initially came to me when I was thinking about my childhood and things I learned along the way. And the phrase solutions, not problems was first spoken by my grade 8 homeroom teacher. I think it was daily, that's how I remember it. We would journal. And he would write that phrase on the board or recite it. And we would begin our day with, I guess, the mindset, even though I don't even think I used that word then, and neither did he, but with the vision of going about your day, thinking about solving problems and how we do that. And of course, I was very open with my family about what I learned in school. And I was very, very close with my mother. I must have mentioned the phrase at some point. And she loved it. So she started using it to the point that I regretted sharing it with her because she used it a lot. And at times when I guess I didn't really want to be reminded of that. Mm-hmm. I've been a worrier most of my life, especially as a child. So I would tend to get caught up in difficulties and fixate on problems and worry about them, which, as we know now and I know now, often makes the problem even bigger. So when she reminded me of this, it used to initially annoy me. But then as I got older, I realized that this made a lot of sense for the same reason that I enjoyed the phrase when it came out of my teacher's mouth as opposed to my mother's, especially initially. And I ended up thinking about that, during my life and applying it. And what it means to me is not that you're not allowed to have problems, because as you know, we always have problems in life. That's part of life. But what matters is, where your frequency lies, right? Are you going to fixate on the problem and make it worse? Or are you going to come away and look at the situation from a different perspective and on a different level, the level of the solution? I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but sometimes when we're trying to unravel something that's bothering us, some kind of problem, some issue at work, if we're constantly thinking about it, we can't solve the issue, right? We can't move past it. Once we leave it and we approach it from a different perspective, or we start thinking more positively that, there will be a solution, or we get some help, all of a sudden the answer is in front of us. And that isn't because of some magic. It's because we've thought about it differently, right? We've detached from that place of, worry and, where you're too close to the problem. So I've really, really applied that in my life. And I've even done so as a mother to a certain extent with my young boy. And he doesn't appreciate it, obviously, or really understand it at this age. He's only 7 right now. But I think that he will one day, and I hope that he will. Yeah. It's very interesting that those words have really affected me all of this time.
It's interesting that there's a cycle of it, right? From you as a child to you as an adult, now to you as a mother, repeating it to your child. And Gina, thank you for sharing the mantra. I found myself sort of doing the chin up, shoulders back, deep breath. And I think that's a good mantra to have as well. Chin up, shoulders back. And I have different visions and different perspectives of what those things mean to me. And Gina, I'm sure it means different things to you as you think about that. So mantras really they can be helpful when we embody them, right? When we actually believe in them, and they support us as we move forward in our journey. So thank you for sharing yours. And Gina, thank you for sharing your mantra. Anita, chapter 7. I love, I think the title, I did it, exclamation mark, I became a lawyer. You talk about the challenges establishing boundaries that many lawyers, many professionals, many women sometimes face. Namely, as you wrote, I'm going to quote this specifically, the challenges of leaving my work in the office and not bringing it home with me. That just kind of brought back a whole bunch of past and recent memories as well. Can you speak to how this impacted you in your early days as a professional and how you manage this today now in your current role as a multifaceted professional parent with different things that you're juggling? Let's hear about that a little bit.
Sure. Early on in my career, it was definitely a challenge to remove myself from my work when I went home for the day. And by removing myself from my work, I'm referring to not only the physical work that you sometimes have to bring home with you, which is, a reality of practicing law and a reality of most professions. There was a struggle there, and I often took work home with me. But the bigger challenge was not constantly thinking about it.
Yeah.
And, thinking and second guessing yourself and worrying about not being available for your client, or thinking about what you need to do the following day, or worrying about a very, sensitive issue on a case, because family law can be quite serious that way and sensitive. And some of the ramifications of decisions have, very, very far-reaching consequences. And as a young professional, I think it's harder to realize that it's not your job to fix everything. It's not your job to constantly be thinking about your files and your clients, because if you do that, you're going to do a disservice ultimately. And it took me some time to realize that, the importance of boundaries and the importance of it to not only, being a better lawyer, but also to my own mental health. I think I worked, very hard as a young lawyer, and at the expense of my personal life to a certain degree, and my ability to put some of that first. I put starting a family on hold because I was the primary income earner, and I thought I needed to work very, very hard and think about, starting a family a few years down the road. And I think that kind of mentality made it more difficult to keep boundaries as well. Whereas, many years later, and now certainly, I do it quite easily. Not to say that it isn't challenging at times, it certainly is. And it depends on what work you're doing and the clients you're dealing with. But I certainly feel that I am better at maintaining my boundaries now, because I realize the importance of it. I realize the expense, that comes along with not maintaining those boundaries, because I lived part of that. Mm-hmm. So I have that appreciation and that knowledge that I didn't have before, because, young professionals look at things quite differently, and they tend to think that working all the time is a good thing. And it isn't necessarily the case.
It's interesting, because as soon as you said that, I had a voice in my head, my father, who would say, work now while you're young. And God bless him, God rest his soul. But that, he's right, work while you're young, but at the same time, never really thinking about the issue of boundaries, right? The other aspect of boundaries, and I'm going to just put a question here for folks: how do others express their boundaries, or where does this show up for you? The place for me, especially so the work and bringing work home and the worry of it, I'm still a work in progress on that. I am more mindful of it, but I'm still a work in progress. Early on for me, especially practicing family law, the boundary that I was not able to really activate was in my relationship. So if I was representing the wife, for example, I was in early days of a relationship at that time. And, thank goodness he was really, really supportive and understanding, because I would bring home all of the opposing sides' challenges or comments or things that they had done wrong, and sort of say, oh, are all men like that? And no, of course not. And at one dinner, my husband would stop me and say, I'm not the bad guy. I'm not that. My then boyfriend, now husband, said, I'm not the bad guy. Not everybody's the same. That was the boundary that I sort of wasn't able to cross.
Interesting.
Taking work home in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a valid point as well, because I can understand that to a certain extent. I really can, because you also start to look at your life through the lens of a family lawyer, for example. And that could be problematic, as you just described. But that's an interesting point about boundaries. Yeah, I very much understand that.
And once it was, I had to have it put to me so that I could see it. Think, okay, what do I need to do to deal with that? So I appreciate the conversation on boundaries. And again, if anybody wants to express what their boundaries, I realize it's a safe space, but an accountable space. But if you want, you can join us on that possibility, that conversation. As you said, one of the main reasons that you wrote the book, although it morphed into more than your infertility journey, is the issue of your infertility journey. And again, I am so grateful for the vulnerability, the bravery that you express, and the courage in sharing that story, because it is a conversation that many women, many professional women do not find the space to share. I saw so many similarities in it that I had experienced and that I had sort of kept quiet, or that I had not really spoken to people about as I was going through the experience. And so while everybody's journey is very unique and very different, there were so many similarities where I thought, oh, there was almost a validation, if you will. And two of the things that I really, really appreciated in this book, Anita, and that struck me, was first, the permission you offered for us to feel all the feelings that one experiences in this kind of a journey, and the practical and emotional impact such a journey has on a career choice that people have. You spoke to that a little bit. Let's start with first of all, the permission. And I'll give you a specific example that just kind of like, yes, we all want to be respectful. We all want to celebrate others. But one of the things for about 2 or so years that I just could not do was go to another baby shower or go to another first birthday or a baptism. Those were challenging for me, but I'd, put on the face up and just, yes, of course, I want to celebrate with others and go. Until you sort of wrote something about that, I had not thought about giving myself permission. Maybe you could speak to what prompted you to want to give permission to feel all the feelings, messy, good, bad, don't judge them, but just to feel them.
What you just described is the reason why, because I think what happens is, we judge ourselves more than others even judge us. And at the time when I was struggling with infertility, I had a lot of difficulty bringing myself to a baby shower, making myself feel that joy and come across as sincere, and hiding and burying my feelings, right, of inadequacy and sadness, like profound sadness. And I did that a lot. I did it for a number of years. I pushed through it. And honestly, I can't think of a single occasion when I actually gave myself that grace and said, I'm going to sit this one out. I think I went ahead and, put on that mask. And although I was happy for the person, I had such sadness that, thinking back when I was writing this chapter of the book, thinking back and, reliving that in a sense, made me really realize that I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to do that. And I could have disappointed the friend or the cousin. I could have. And if they truly understood and had taken the time to speak to me, and perhaps they didn't even need to do that because they did understand, and I was the one who was self-judging, then really it would not have been the end of the world had I decided to sit that one out. I think that a lot of women who are going through infertility feel a sense of shame, even though, I rationally understood that there wasn't anything wrong with me in that sense, and that it was a problem that others experienced as well. I still judged myself. I still felt embarrassed. And obviously, I didn't think I was worthy enough or deserved to give myself that space and not go to that baby shower, for example, or not answer a question that someone posed to me about why, I didn't have kids after being married for 5 years. There were a lot of those experiences where I felt like I had to answer in a respectful or, fake way and not really explain what was going on, even though a lot of people around me knew that I was having challenges. They obviously didn't know the depths of, how it was affecting my life. And as professionals, we tend to minimize, and I know I'm generalizing, but a lot of professional women tend to minimize the personal struggles that they are experiencing, partly because they, just put themselves second, and partly because they just feel ashamed and don't want to share that part of themselves. And so they do minimize what they're experiencing. So I thought it was important to include that in the book. I was very open about my feelings and struggles, and I didn't want to just scratch the surface and go into a narrative about what my experience was without really sharing authentically what I went through, even if it meant sharing very personal elements of my story. And there are very many personal elements here that, 5 years earlier, I would never have imagined sharing with the world and potentially having my peers and colleagues read one day.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful that you did, and I hope that others are grateful that you did. And again, I think it's a reminder of what we have the opportunity or permission to do, and it's a permission. And whether or not, as you're going through it, you experience it differently, or in retrospect allow yourself to see it, I think it's an important conversation for us to have. What about the other aspect of it in terms of the practical and emotional impact on your career journey? And you were very realistic about having to run from client meeting to a therapy session, or to an in vitro session, or to do blood work and back again. Or the question that you had right now, was I too busy to did I put off a family, for example? Speak to that for us.
Sure. So when I did IVF, in vitro fertilization, I did 4 rounds of it. Two cycles were full cycles. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to take time off work to do those. And I honestly don't know how I would have been able to handle it otherwise, because I have heard of people doing those cycles and running around to appointments and going back to work. And I just made the decision that I couldn't handle that. But then when I did the other 2 cycles, which were not full cycles, so there's less involved, a less invasive process, I worked while I did those cycles. And it was still difficult. It was still challenging. And it was difficult to slow down and try to be at peace and calm enough. Because if anyone has experienced infertility and has gone through assisted reproduction, like in vitro, a lot of what you're doing, in addition to the medical procedures, is trying to slow down, be calm, be happy, and not always be on edge and, stressed, right? Or that's the belief. And that was the belief I had, that was very, very important. So that was definitely a challenge. And before deciding to do assisted reproduction, when I first started having my challenges and realized that I wasn't getting pregnant, when we made the decision, okay, we're going to start our family now, that's when I started questioning whether my choice of career path and my decision to put that first and focus on the career led to the infertility, right? I chose a stressful career. I chose, practicing at a firm that did a lot of litigation, and I was in court a lot, and I was at the office 11 hours a day at the beginning of my career. That was a very regular part of my life. So I made these choices, and it led to difficulties conceiving. That's what I truly believed. Later, I realized that it's more complicated than that because there are reasons that cannot be explained. And stress is very, very complex, and stress doesn't necessarily come from long hours. It comes from your whole outlook and how you deal with your life. So, that realization came a lot later. But those were my challenges. And it was only when I really realized that I needed to let go of planning everything, including planning how and when I'd become a mother, that things happened. And that, was a real impetus to writing this book.
Okay, so on that point, the next question that you and I have talked about is letting go, and a large part, especially in the latter part of the book, is speaking to the freedom that comes with relinquishing control, letting go, being in the moment. Two ways of being that are really difficult for a lot of women, a lot of professional women, a lot of lawyers. Just women generally, letting go, and so relinquishing control, I'm using that language, and being in the moment. So how did you manage? You told us about recognizing it, but how did you manage to do both of those?
Okay, and would you like me to speak to relinquishing control in the context of my fertility journey, and then broader than that?
Absolutely, yeah,
okay.
You can.
So in the case of the former, when you're navigating the path to potential motherhood and you're not getting pregnant, you're constantly focused on what you're missing in your life, as you know, and you're in a mindset of scarcity and lack, and struggle. So you're constantly longing for a baby. So that's how you go about your day. That's how I went about my day. Not that I thought about it all day, but it was there in my mind, in the way I conducted myself in my life. That's what was motivating me, that sense of lack. And I was trying and doing all the things and trying to become a mother, including pursuing assisted reproduction. And, that was a challenging path, but it was only when I realized that it's going to happen if it happens. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay. It took a long time to get there.
That's okay is important, right?
Yes. And it was, I never truly understood that until, we expanded our family by welcoming a golden retriever puppy into our family. And he was truly my spirit dog, in the sense that he made me whole at a time in my life when I felt that I wasn't whole for many, many years. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get emotional because he's no longer with us, but Dylan was truly the catalyst for my ability to let go. And that's when I truly focused on what I had versus focusing on what I perceived I was missing. And then, after believing that I could never get pregnant naturally, I conceived naturally. And I miscarried, but then I got pregnant again a few months later. And then we had James. In terms of relinquishing control in other aspects of my life, I've learned to do that more because I was always moving forward in a linear way, in the sense of the path towards practicing law, and then practicing at the same firm for 19 years and just going on that path and not really trying anything else and not really listening to the whispers and nudges. And then I realized, I stepped away from that for 2 years, and there was a lot of letting go there. There was a lot of letting go. And part of it, I had no choice but to do something. But I made choices in, the months after that. And I pursued coaching, and I decided to write a book. And that was a letting go for me, in the sense of, really listening to my inner voice and pursuing the other elements of me. and realizing that I could do other things. And I didn't have to really know whether I would ever come back to practicing law, when that would be. That was a real struggle initially, whether I was done with practicing. Because a part of me and a part of my old programming was to know for certain whether that was on the horizon again. And because I didn't have that answer, it caused me a lot of discomfort at first. But then following that discomfort, there was a lot of growth because I realized that I didn't really have to know that answer. And, I've now been practicing again for almost 2 years.
Not having all the answers can be
Yes.
overwhelming for some of us. I don't know how others feel on the call, but that can be, we need to know. And again, that's part of the losing control or relinquishing control is maybe I don't know, but if something is along the way, feeling like it's pulling you or pushing you, explore it, right? And be okay with not knowing. I think that's a huge possibility that many of us get really tense about.
Huge. It is so huge, especially if you're someone who likes to have a plan A and a plan B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a backup. And when you don't have that backup and you're doing something different, boy, that's a big step and a scary step. But, I learned as a coach, one of the most important things I learned when I got my own coaching, and then when I started out as a coach, is that growth isn't truly growth without discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you hear the phrase coming out of your comfort zone. And I didn't appreciate what that meant until then. And, it's okay to have fear, and it's okay to, not have all the answers and have that path, set for you, even in some rough way. It's okay to have no path. It really is. If you trust in yourself, and if you trust that you can't really get it wrong, because who's to say what's right and wrong?
I think who's to say what's right or wrong, because sometimes you don't have that trust in yourself, and finding that again, where anybody might be losing it or might have lost it temporarily in terms of that faith in themselves is important. And part of that, I think in the next question, Chapter 14, you used a phrase, the motherhood paradigm, your motherhood paradigm, because you had a wonderful, wonderful example, role model. The narrative, though, that comes with it, that many educated, successful, professional women have, that they cannot be both a good mother and a good lawyer, professional, whatever the case might be, at the same time. How did you end up reconciling your beliefs, your knowledge, and your experience with this particular motherhood paradigm that you had?
That was a huge, huge challenge for me, and a huge example of growth, because I am in such a different place now than I was when I first became a mother. When I first became a mother, I was so grateful, and I had such feelings of joy that finally it happened. But mixed in with all of that was a lot of self-doubt. I did not trust myself as a mother for a long time. I felt inferior. I felt like I was not worthy of this, the journey that I went on. And, I felt like a failure at times and a fraud, because I felt like I was not a good mother. My son cried a lot, and didn't cry. He screamed a lot. And
Did you do that?
And now, like I look back and I think I was so consumed with probably some postpartum was happening, and I didn't, get the help I needed in that sense. But I think that's what it was. And it was a combination of, depression and anxiety, likely, that made me question everything and question my ability to be a good mother. And then I started also thinking that, I couldn't be a good lawyer and a good mother because I could barely handle being a mom. And, my mat leave wasn't a great experience. It was like a struggle. A lot of it was a struggle. And going back to work, I thought, okay, I have a little one and I can't do the things I did before, and my work's going to suffer. I can't take on, the responsibilities I had before. I had a lot of self-doubt because in my mind, I thought you had to be perfect, right? Like you had to just, really, really, especially after wanting it for so long, right? And I had that career down pat and I had the success, and surely I should be able to continue doing that as effectively. It was like a very different mindset and mentality. And I was really, really hard on myself. I look back now and I think, I didn't deserve that. And that was really, really not fair to me. Then I realized slowly, but I realized that, being a mother isn't about perfection because there's no such thing. And everyone mothers differently and everyone's experience is different. And I just started trusting in myself and not thinking about, how others are going to look at me or judge me, or because none of that was happening. It was all me, right?
Self-judgment.
Yes. It's amazing what time does. And, I guess that was another letting go moment, letting go of the expectations I had of myself. Yeah.
And that's huge, both in the motherhood paradigm and also in the career paradigm. Because, as you said, you made the comment, I wanted it so much. And then I felt like I couldn't do it. And for many of us, when we reach certain, we get a job or we get a position or we get something that we've longed for so long, and all of a sudden the reality seems quite different than what we had envisioned in our head. And we think that we're just not good enough or cut out for it. And being able to just somehow relinquish that thought, I think is really important, to be able to just to be in that moment and accept the event, the occurrence, the journey, as well as what we're doing in that moment, and being able to not judge ourselves as harshly as we tend to do, I think, at times, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that was a big part for me, of being able to live in the moment when I was parenting, rather than constantly worrying about, what's next, and will I be able to handle it, or will there be this other challenge? As soon as I started living more in the moment, things went a lot better because there were more moments of that peace and just, trust and just joy.
No, I appreciate that. I've got to tell you that I've got and I won't say from who, a direct message from one of the participants who's indicating how much this story, your story, resonates with her, and being able to hear it is really, really important and relevant to her. So I just wanted to let you know.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I'm
so glad to hear that.
Whether they connect with you separately later, but I just wanted to reflect that back. And I think it happens for many of us sometimes when we're hearing a story that just sits perfectly well, or reading a story that sits perfectly well with what our experiences are. And on that, the judging that we do, the fears that we have, throughout your book, you discuss and you talk about different types of mindset, the importance of mindset, and you talk about cultivating. And there's sort of about 2 or 3 that I was in particularly that I gravitated towards: an open mindset, an abundant mindset, and a grateful mindset, and how that can support us thriving both personally and professionally. Can you share what you mean by mindset, and then those 3 in particular, and how do we get it? How do we achieve open, abundant, grateful mindsets?
It's definitely a process, and I don't think it ever really ends, because, I still catch myself at times, and there are probably other times where I don't even notice and should catch myself, but I catch myself when I'm in that, fixed type of mindset, the scarcity mindset, as opposed to where I want to be. And I think what it truly is about is realizing that you can change and adapt to your circumstances. And, you're not born with certain skills and are limited to those skills or abilities, or what somebody may have described you as having in terms of skills. You are a lot more than that. And the other element of it is that I think that most of the population goes about their daily lives reacting to circumstance. Obviously, we're not living in a bubble, and we have to realize what's going on around us and adapt to situations. I mean, that's part of life, and it's a part of, living your life a certain way and thriving, in my view. But if you're constantly reacting to, a challenge or an event that happens outside of you, then I don't believe that you are living an abundant life, and that you're allowing yourself to be open to opportunities, growth, joy, love, all the good things. Because we don't realize that we're co-creators of our lives. We don't realize that we have the power to change our circumstance. So I think a growth mindset is about, you have to remind yourself of those things. And whether you do that by journaling, by having a mantra that you recite daily, by, talking about these concepts with like-minded people, all these things that hopefully end up in becoming habits that then become, practices, right? And then hopefully become how you live your life. And that's what coaching did for me to a certain extent. They really, the process opened up my mind to how the mind works in a way that I didn't truly understand before. And then I learned, some valuable skills of what I could do daily, just very simple things that might take 15 or 20 minutes a day, that, I was quite good at incorporating into my day regularly. Not as good doing that now since returning to practice. It's more of an effort, but there are reminders that you can instill in your life, whether that's through journaling, whether that's through reading certain things, so that you realize that you do have the ability to live abundantly. And I believe that mindset then, attracts certain things into your life, because the more open you are and the more grateful you are for what you have. For example, just as I was grateful and finally became content with what I had in my life and appreciated it, then you open up yourself to possibility. If you're constantly thinking about what's missing, how will anything in your life open up, right? You're living closed, you're small, nothing can penetrate those walls, right? And there's really something to that. There really is.
It's interesting because, living small is not what we want anybody here to do, or anybody watching afterwards to do. And you sort of chuckled as you said, there are some practices I incorporated that I don't do as often, but is there one practice that you have kept up religiously, if I can use that phrase, but just you've got a commitment to one particular practice out of the different ones that you may have done over the previous times that still is a daily or a very regular part of your routine?
Sure. I would say I'd like it to be daily, but it's more regular. And that would be, I do a bit of journaling. Mm-hmm. I try to do it first thing in the morning or before I go to bed. Usually first thing in the morning tends to work better, although ideally I should do it both. And
no shoulds allowed here, right? No shoulds.
That's right. That's right. And what I mean by journaling is not, writing out, a few paragraphs of what my day has been like, but it's journaling in a very intentional way. And that is basically writing out 3 or 4 sentences of what I want to accomplish or what I want to do that day, or, 6 months from now, or some kind of a goal, whether it's a very short-term goal or a longer-term goal, but writing it out as if it has occurred. Mm-hmm. And it's here already. So for example, when I decided I wanted to go back to law, but I was still not sure how that would happen, or didn't even know how to picture that because I didn't know where I would be, I wrote out what I wanted to feel like and what I wanted to be doing. But I didn't say I would like to. I said I am a partner at a firm practicing family law. I have, an extensive client base. I enjoy my work. I did it in the present. And I did it in a way that was reinforcing to me that it's here. And I learned that skill as a coach because it makes a difference rather than wishing something or hoping it will happen. You know, it's great to have a plan, right? And to have goals. But if you write it out as if it's occurred and it's part of you and you're living it, you're more likely to live it.
Yeah. You know, you talk about the journaling and very intentional journaling. And one of the things, we're coming at 8 o'clock and I want to open it up to any questions or comments, but I'm going to put a question in the chat because I loved in your book at the end, you very intentionally have certain questions and two that, and you label them, you invite the reader to pause, reflect, and lean in. And while there were a lot of really neat ones for me, two of the favorite ones that I had were, who would you be if you release the expectations and agendas placed on you by others? There's just something in the wording of that, Anita, that triggered a whole bunch of things for me. But who would you be if you release the expectations and agendas placed on you by others? And in chapter 17, and I think there was an element of it in an earlier chapter as well. This question, which I would invite people to share if they have the answer to, when was the last time that you allowed yourself to play, love, laugh, live freely? And the associated question, when was the last time you immersed yourself in an activity for pure pleasure and enjoyment? Sort of become that free child again and not the serious professional, the serious parent, the serious adult that we always are. And I wonder, so if anybody wants to answer, when was the last time you allowed yourself to play, love, laugh, live freely, please feel free to do so. But Anita, my question to you on this one is, you offer the reader the permission to think about these things that they may not have thought of for a long time. Why are these powerful questions important? Why do they make them their way into the end of each chapter for you?
I think because these are questions that I would love people to pose of themselves that they wouldn't necessarily think to do. Like you said, you know, how often do we stop and think about these things, right? And I wanted the book to be more than a memoir style book and a, you know, biography. I really wanted my reader to interact with the book and hopefully find, you know, some resonance in what I was describing in their own lives. And I thought that an effective way to do that would be to incorporate these types of questions that would then have the reader, you know, think about the chapter they had just read and apply it to their own lives, such as the question you just highlighted. You know, that isn't a question we ask of ourselves very often, if at all, when we're, you know, in our busy adult lives. And, you know, a good example of an instance that you described is, you know, when I really get into playing with my son without thinking about, okay, I have to go back and send this email in 20 minutes, or I'm really tired and I don't really feel like doing this right now. If I actually get into the activity for a few minutes and lose myself in it, then I'm just doing it for the sake of doing it and having fun, as opposed to doing it for reason A, B, and C, like we tend to rationalize when we're making decisions as adults.
I love, there are a couple of things that came up. Admittedly, Anna, thank you. It's been a while, but trying to make a change. And again, that understanding, or just that observation is really helpful. And getting a dog, someone said getting a dog was also an awesome life choice because she insists that I play with her daily. And thank you for sharing your story with us.
Great.
And somebody injured her foot playing extreme fetch in the house. So I get it, absolutely. And being with my dog has definitely done it. The other time for me, I remember at my goddaughter's wedding last fall. It was the first time because my parents had been ill, just we hadn't had the chance really. It was the first time that I danced, and I remembered how much I love to dance, Greek, all of it, right? And it was really just an opening joy for me to be able to spend a couple of hours dancing without thought. And it was just a reminder that, why don't I do this more often?
Yes.
And that question that you had was just a really, really helpful one. I've got one more question for you, but I want to open it up before I do. I can ask you this afterwards, but let me just ask, and I know these are both career and personal, that mix of conversation and themes that we're talking about. But does anybody have any questions for Anita, or any thoughts or comments that you want to share? And feel free to unmute if you can, turn on your video, and we can invite you to either ask a question or share any comments. I'm getting some direct messages, Anita, and I realize that there's some personal conversations, but let me just pause for a second and see if anybody has.
Sure. And feel like you can ask anything. I encourage you to, if something's on your mind and you want to ask it, but you're worried about it being too personal, go ahead.
Anita, I just, this is just an observation, and, I haven't read the book, but you mentioned in the chapter about motherhood paradigm, a book by Glennon Doyle. And this was actually the little passage that you had in your book. Was very powerful for me, about how mothers are often martyrs, yes, but it's a terrible burden for their children to bear. I never looked at it that way, but it's so true. It is so
I agree.
True. It is
I
so
agree.
true. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's, your children actually want you to be happy, and your children want you to success, in your own world where they're not participants. But as mothers, at least, you mentioned it in your book that you felt that way. I certainly felt that way. Most of my motherhood, that I'm first and foremost here for my children, and that I need to be there for them no matter what, at any time, and just, it resonated with me this morning. I had an early meeting in the morning, and I usually drop my daughter off to school every morning. And this morning I couldn't. And I thought she would be very upset. She usually would, but she actually wasn't. She was dropped off by my husband. She had fun with him. And I thought the whole drive to my meeting, I thought, oh, she's going to be so upset, and
yes,
too bad an early morning meeting, where in fact, she wasn't at all. And she was probably happy for me to do my own thing, So a lot of it is self-inflicted, and not very factual.
I totally agree. And thank you for sharing that, because when I read that part of Glennon Doyle's book, and the book is Untamed, it's every time I read those paragraphs, they land a little differently for me. They're so powerful, but it really made me examine how many times and how much I think that, if I do this, then I'm not being as effective in my mothering, or this is going to make my son feel upset or think something less of me, when in fact, as you've described, he likely was very happy that I was able to do this, or he didn't really care, right? Ultimately, because it didn't affect
maybe he did, but it's not the end of the world.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's very difficult for mothers to say, we deserve certain things, and our happiness doesn't have to come second. We don't have to sacrifice our happiness or a choice or something for our children, and choosing to do something that may not involve our children doesn't make us any less of a good mother.
Exactly.
I'm really glad you shared that.
I really like that part. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've got a big sticky on that page to get the book, by the way, and I haven't.
So it's a great book. A great book.
Anybody else have any comments? Thank you. And I'm seeing Miriam. I'm thinking, Ivana, but Miriam. Okay, we'll call you Miriam today.
That was her Zoom when
I wondered.
online school. So I just stayed with my daughter.
That's okay. Gina, thank you. Somebody's saying that the audiobook is awesome too. So I take that Santain, one or the other. I will pick the book up. Any other questions or comments for Anita or for any of us right now, whether it's about infertility journeys, careers, motherhood paradigms, mindset, and how important mindset is to our lives? Any other comments? Let me go to one last question, Anita. You end the book and you reflect in a few pages, reinvention is a really good thing, reminding us all that the only thing that we're certain of is change, right? That change is the only certainty. And this took you from what you described in your book, a considerable amount of time to actually acknowledge it and to recognize it. So how do you live this theme of reinvention? Maybe you can define it for us your way. And as she's telling us about reinvention, I'd love for people to sort of think about their own times of reinvention or perhaps future reinvention that might be coming up. Anita, let me just ask you, first of all, reinvention, what does it mean and how are you living that now?
So at one time, reinvention used to signify failure to me, you know, or I didn't like the word. And in more recent years, I've realized that it's actually very important, and it's actually about not simply, you know, moving from one career to another, which is how I equated it in the past. I thought it's about, you know, giving up on something and not, you know, going through with it and giving up that career and failing. It's about reinvention in the sense of really evolving and becoming who you really want to become, and becoming and staying true to every part of you and living authentically and not, you know, dimming certain aspects of you. You know, and it's all part of the narrative that, you know, I've thankfully recognized and accepted more recently, which is that you can be more than one thing. And we're also like constantly reinventing ourselves, right? Because we're evolving. I mean, life is not static, and it's now more than simply thinking about, you know, moving from career to career, which caused me stress in the past. It's about moving from career to career and also fully embracing all of my layers, and, you know, whether they're, you know, embracing my creative abilities, you know, in writing, and, you know, my skills as a lawyer and an advocate, and, you know, the skills I learned coaching. It's really about, you know, really stepping into all of that and appreciating it and being proud of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm really glad that you have been able to share the various reinventions that you have engaged in, and I suspect there's still some reinventions coming into the future, right?
That's right.
For all of us, we have different stages of reinvention, and spring always reminds me of that. And so I really am grateful to you for taking us along on this journey with you. I want to put up, because people were asking the information if they wanted to contact you. Here's your, I'm hoping people can see it, your email address and your LinkedIn. So you are on LinkedIn, and you'd be open to people connecting with you and asking you further questions. So again, I think it's just really, really helpful with the information that you've shared. One of the things that, before I close, I do want to remind everybody, June 27th, we're going to be talking about the good fight, about how to use conflict productively with teams. And that's, you know, when we're dealing with the stresses of potentially of infertility, the last thing we need is to think about conflict. Leanne's going to walk us through a few things about conflict that might very well be helpful, but that's next month, June 27th. For now, what I wanted to just to close with, and it's a quote in your book, and I want to go back to your contact information, Anita. Page 172, you wrote, leaving others with the impression of increase means going about your day with the specific intention of leaving others better than you found them. So through this book and our conversation tonight, you've definitely left us all feeling better than you found us. And I'm really grateful to you, Anita. Thank you to you and to everybody for joining us this evening. Grateful to you for sharing your story and for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, everyone. I was so happy to participate, and thank you for being here this evening.
All right, everybody have a really good rest of the evening. I'll see some of you next month. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and keep the mindset as open, abundant, and grateful as we possibly can. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.